Serious, what is your most scariest outdoor experience? Long form. While I was growing up, my family would visit the same lake every year for a week every summer. As we got older, we would visit a large rock we called the cliffs and jump off. The rock was only 15 feet tall at the highest point, but the water was really deep. When we got older, we would jump in and try to touch the bottom, but we never could. When my brother and I were in our teens, we took kayaks out to the cliffs to jump on our own. We jumped off several times, and when we got too cold, we took a break on the top of the cliffs to warm up in the sun. As we were sitting there, we noticed a white shape in the water, floating towards the surface. It was a letter, H. Eventually, it sank back into the water, and we lost sight of it. Before we could look away or say anything, another shape was floating upwards. It was the letter E. Eventually, it too sank below, but it was soon followed by two more letters, L and P. We didn't jump in after that. We stood up and left without saying a word. We never mentioned it to anyone, and I forgot it even happened after a while. Several years ago, I was working as a camp counselor and I told the story as a ghost story. I had forgotten about it, and I texted my brother to see if I hadn't just made it up completely. I asked him if he remembered the time we went to the jumping cliffs alone and saw something in the water. He replied yes, that he did remember. I asked him what it was, and his reply was, letters. They spelled help. I am an outdoorsman. I'm very experienced in hunting, camping, hiking, and general survival. I'm very familiar and used to wildlife, and I was charged by what I believe was a cryptid called a dogman. It charged me and my cousin. It was not a bear. A bear cannot move how it did, and it was not a normal wolf as they can't comfortably run on two legs, whereas what charged us seemed natural at doing. I can elaborate further if you wish. This happened around June or July of 2007, I believe. I was around 17 years old and more cocky then, but still somewhat knowledgeable of the outdoors. My family used to own a cabin in northwest Wisconsin. I basically grew up there in the summer. I knew the woods well, but at night, it was wise to stay in the cabin or at least by the bonfire by the beach because of bears, wolves, and cougars. One of the creepiest things was if you were having a bonfire, the tree line was visible from the fire pit and beach, and at night you always felt like you were being watched from that tree line. But during the day, the woods always seemed normal, not so creepy, that is until this incident. So this happened somewhere between 1200 to 1400. Me and my cousin were having an airsoft battle. I was in full woodland camo, he was not. I retreated onto the ATV trail into the woods for a tactical advantage, and our battle took us about 200 meters into about a third of the way up the trail. We had enough at this point and were standing at the edge of a clearing on the trail talking, and he was maybe 10 feet from me when I decided to mess with him. I shushed him and said, "We're being watched." He froze, then I realized the woods were dead quiet, and I got spooked and started scanning the tree line and the other edge of the clearing from left to right when I saw it. Its teeth gave it away, it was panting and staring at my cousin. I don't expect you to believe me, but what I saw was a wolf as big as a black bear, at least 300 pounds, but it wasn't normal. This wolf was on two legs crouching next to a tree with its arm grasping the tree, grasping with a clawed hand. It had reddish-brown fur. I told my cousin that, "We have to go," and next thing I know, he is sprinting, and I look back at Wolfie who had locked on and sprinted a few steps on 2 feet, and then I turned and ran when it looked like Wolfie was dropping to all fours. It charged us and sounded right on our back barreling through the brush, but for whatever reason, let us go when we broke out of the tree line and headed for the cabin. What stuck with me the most was the sheer size. Wolfie appeared to be nearly 7 tall when upright, and that where it should have had front paws, it appeared to have large clawed hands. Now I'm not sure how to explain it away rationally. I have heard wolves will occasionally kind of walk upright, but as far as I know, they can't sprint on 2 legs, nor do wolves get that big, and black bears more waddle on 2 legs. The closest description is silly, a werewolf or dogman. Thank you for reading. When I first returned from the war, I was a power line rigger. This was on EHV lines, extra high voltage, the kind on the top of the steel towers. Those are transmission lines, not subtransmission like most inner-city lines. So anyway, I had a job during a heavy wind storm, 2008, to go out and repair some lines near the Colorado and New Mexico border. Great pay since it was an emergency call-out, so I agreed. I meet up with my crewman and head down from Colorado Springs area. We get there around 9 p.m. and start getting to work. Windstorms are notorious for felling lines, but not EHV or UHV lines, since they are rigged different. When I crane up to see the broken link on the tower and inspect the damage, I remember seeing over the tops of most trees. I observed the view for a moment and saw some light nearby, from a campfire. As soon as I saw the light, I heard yelling coming from that area. It must have been about 200 to 300 yards away, but I heard a woman clearly yelling, and she kept saying, "Someone please help," over and over again. I craned down and start yelling for the other guys. They heard it too and were asking questions. I told them about the campfire lights coming from the direction our trucks were facing kind of. We jumped in one of the smaller trucks, since it was 4x4, and headed down the road. We looked everywhere for the light, but didn't find anything. We drove back and forth, and then back again and slowed down. We rolled the windows down and stopped the truck in about the area the light would be. We all heard moaning sounds coming from the right of our truck, so to the north. It sounded like two old people who are having heart attacks. And it was really loud. So now we're on edge. The site supervisor was calling the police now and giving the general area we were at. They told us to check to see if we see anything if we felt safe. Because I had that war veteran attitude, I decided to go take a look. Two guys came with and our supervisor stayed with the truck to wait for police. Apparently, they had a station not too far, so they said 10 to 15 minutes. I armed myself with a pickaxe and the other guys had conduit pipes. Like 1-inchers. We all started walking through the trees with our headlamps on because it was really dark now. The moaning was still coming from ahead of us. We got through the trees and into a small clearing. Looked empty. The moaning stopped and we checked around. Nothing. We went back to the truck and as soon as we got to it, we heard the woman yell again. Same thing. Someone please help. It was just to the north where we just were. One of the guys yelled back, "Where are you?" and got no reply. Then we heard her scream in pain and nothing else. We were already running back north and the police were showing up. They must have seen us running north because two of them came after us. We stopped in the field area and they stopped with us and asked us what was going on. We told them. They helped us look around and we saw nothing else. We walked back to the truck and didn't hear anything else. They said they would hang out with us for a bit. We got back to work on the line and got it fitted. The police stayed parked next to each other talking while we worked. When I craned up, I couldn't see any campfire light or anything. We did the job, took about an hour and a half and we were done. When we were packing our tools to head out, one of the cops left and the other came up to us. He told us that just to the west, there was a small airplane that crashed and the people burned to death. He said when the police and paramedics got to the scene, they were still on fire, but they were gone. He told us about how two bodies were found away from the plane like they were crawling away from it, and one body was stuck in one of the windows. Said it happened in the 70s or 80s. Yeah, we packed up fast and got the flurbo out of there fast. So in retrospect, I never saw a fire, just light on the trees from one. I can't tell you how creepy that experience was to find out afterwards. The voices and moans were so clear. I always kind of believed in an afterlife or something, but this was truly the thing that flurbo my head up. I'm so glad other people were there to experience it though. The cop believed us too, but said he didn't hear about any other reports of seeing or hearing anything in this area. This was a service road anyway, so it wasn't traveled too much. I have a grandma and grandpa who go out on long fishing, hunting trips. First day they go out, don't get anything at all. Camp out in a tent. Middle of the night, grandma wakes up and swears she hears what sounds like somebody walking around the tent and knocking on it. She wakes up husband, but he tells her to sleep. Later on that night, he's the one who wakes up and now he's hearing things. But he claims he's hearing what sounds like whispering. He stays up until sunrise, wakes up his wife and they continue their trip. As the day ends, they have a couple of squirrels and contemplate to just going home. Grandma insists on just going home after last night, but Grandpa wants to stay one more night to go fishing in the morning. The compromise is that they sleep in the back of their truck since they have a shell, sleeping mats and sleeping bags. That night, neither of them can fall asleep. Both doze off here and there but ultimately, they're still a bit shook from the previous night. A few hours go by and suddenly, they both hear what sounds like tapping against the car. The tapping goes around, almost like somebody is circling the car. They're terrified at this point. Obviously they're out in the middle of nowhere, so they don't have signal, and they're trapped in the back of their truck. They simply wait it out. The tapping goes on and off for what they claim to be hours. They said that at some points, the car would even be shaken back and forth and that they would hear what sounded like talking. Finally, after what seemed to be ages, it stops. They wait about 30 minutes and nothing happens. They immediately bolt out and drive home. Needless to say, they don't ever go on trips like that on their own anymore. Okay, so I was traveling, this is in Australia for context, and I was at this campsite about 20 minutes past a small town and had gotten there about an hour-ish after dark. Now I was the only person there, and when I called the off-site caretaker to book, he said that since it was just me that I could use the day shelter kitchen, so instead of setting up my tent in the dark, I decided to drag my sleeping bag inside where I had some actual light. Hours later, I realized I required something from my car, so I drag open the sliding door, and this wasn't a small door, it was one of those big loud ones like you would see on a barn. I was looking out into the darkness as there was no lights or moon, just the glow from the lights behind me. Now, in case you have never been in a situation like this, the light reaches about 10 meters and then has about 1 meter where it drops off into nothingness. And in this small patch, I saw 4 legs. These were not just normal legs, they were like those of a dog and long like human leg length long, and they were bright white and stretched up to where they should connect to the body of the animal, but there was nothing there. Then it began to move. The legs walked. They walked in parallel to the building, making sure that they remained in that gray corridor, then disappeared into the darkness. I decided that I didn't really need to get whatever it was from my car and slept barricaded in the tiny office. To this day, I don't know what they were, and I have looked into it, nor do I know how long they were there before I saw it. But I do know that thing was smart enough to know how humans see and where the gray corridor was from my viewpoint.